This is Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here he is, the host of the podcast, AWR Hawkins.
Welcome to Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart News podcast focused on guns, gun rights, the Second Amendment. You know, we sum these things up here each day under the banner of freedom, or I should say each week, and we do that because an armed citizen is a free citizen. It's as simple as that. Folks, there is so much news this week, and I mean good news, all right? Before I get to it, I want to continue to encourage you to be sure you vote in the upcoming midterms. Be sure you vote pro-gun. Folks, our Second Amendment is always at stake. We thank God for President Trump. What a great man. How he withstands the assault against him, I do not know, but so great to have him. But he desperately needs, a pro-gun House and a pro-gun Senate. And so I think we need to, especially those of you that might live in, say, North Dakota or say Montana or Indiana or Florida, those of you who live in a state, in Missouri, you live in a state where Arizona, where things are either up for grabs because there's a vacated seat or where there is a Democrat in a red state running for re-election. It's time to get rid of those folks. You live in Montana, vote John Tester out. You live in Indiana, vote Joe Donnelly out. Joe Donnelly, friend of Joe Biden. See, folks, if you live in Indiana, the fact that Joe Biden keeps coming to your state to campaign for Joe Donnelly, that should be all you need to know where he stands on guns. Because Joe Biden is no friend of guns. And if he supports Donnelly, then it's clear that he and Donnelly share some views there that are not good for the Second Amendment. Same thing in Missouri with McCaskill. McCaskill, by the way, if you live in Missouri, she thinks you're stupid. We covered that this week. An undercover video from Project Veritas. We covered it at Breitbart. She admitted that she supported bans in the past, assault weapons and other types of bans, and was very outgoing in her admission because she didn't know she was being videoed. And her staff mocked Missourians, laughed. Yeah, she has certain views she can't let out now because she won't be able to win re-election. But they went on to discuss some of those views. One of them includes a ban on semiautomatic rifles. Does that reflect your values in Missouri? Folks, you live in Missouri, you're better than this. You got to vote McCaskill out. Vote Hawley in. Vote for Josh Hawley. You have to do it. This is the same around the country. Look, you live in Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn. That's who you have to vote for. You can't vote for this Phil Bredesen guy. Phil Bredesen, who leaves Tennessee to go to Manhattan and do fundraisers with Michael Bloomberg. See, just as Joe Donnelly's close relationship to Joe Biden tells you in Indiana, tells you that you can't trust Joe Donnelly, in that same way, Phil Bredesen's close relationship with Michael Bloomberg tells you in Tennessee you cannot trust Phil Bredesen. You simply can't. Get out there and vote for Marsha Blackburn. Pro-Second Amendment to the core. Folks, we had some tremendous news this week. Tremendous. And I'm going to start it off by covering 2 or 3 different polls. And let me correct myself. 2 different polls, but I had to take 3 different angles on them to get you all the information you deserve from those polls, okay? And so that's what I'm doing right now. I want to start by covering these things with you. But we had a poll, which is very important, that it shows that approaching, of course, as we approach, the midterm election, support for gun control is faltering. Now, this is very important. You'll remember after the Parkland shooting, which was February 14th of 2018, all these little kids who just learned how to tie their shoes, they emerged as cult heroes. for people who couldn't find a hero anywhere else, and people like David Hogg and such. And, you know, they were telling us all what they were going to do and how they were going to win and how they were going to run the country and how they were going to set things right and yada, yada, yada. Right? You remember all that. Well, at that point, support for stricter gun control hit about 67%. It has now fallen to 61% as we approach the midterm elections. And the bottom line is this: gun control is just not that popular with people. Now, I know what you're thinking. You go, well, 61% is pretty popular. Yeah, it is, until you look at the breakdown. See, the number is never what that particular number of 61%, that is not really the telling figure. You have to look down to party affiliation. What's the driving force in that 61%? Oh, it's Democrats, 87% of whom want stricter gun control. Well, guess what? Who cares? The Democrats are a bunch of losers. And by that, I mean their party. The Democrat Party was beaten in 2016 presidential election, and we look for them to be beaten again in the midterms. That's why we have to show up and vote. Our gun rights depend on it. But as I say, when you look at 61% gun control support, you're not looking at just rank and file Americans. You're looking at the driving force in that 61% being Democrats, 87% of whom support gun control. Only 31% of Republicans want more gun control. All right? So Democrats are the driving force. But the good news from that poll, and that was a Gallup poll, the good news is that as the midterms approach, support for gun control is faltering. Okay? Now, here's another thing that I drew as well from that same poll, but this was in another piece, but it's very important. Gun control support is down 17% over the past 28 years. I want to say that again. I know sometimes it's hard when there's so many numbers in things, but gun control support is down 17% over the past 28 years. In 1990, percentage of Americans supporting gun control was 78%. Now, percentage of Americans supporting gun control is 61%. And when I say supporting gun control, I mean wanting more gun control. 78% in 1990, 61% now. You cannot be mocked for thinking that it would have been just the opposite. 61% in 1990, 78% now. Don't feel dumb if that's what you thought. Because if you watch CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, NBC, what else could you think? When you watch those outlets, you get the impression that Americans are rallying around gun control, that it has become the newest, biggest, bestest cause ever. But it's not so. Gun control support is actually fallen 17% in the last 28 years. That's heartening. That's heartening for freedom lovers. And I think it's an important point, and that's why I'm touching on it here. So already, looking at that one poll, what do we know? We know that gun control support has fallen between Parkland and now. As the midterm elections approach, it has fallen. And what else do we know? That over the past 28 years, from 1990 till now, it has fallen quite a bit. 17%. Again, you will never get this information from CNN. I think they probably just they refuse to even report it. Even if in reporting they would twist it, they'll refuse to mention it. Now let me hit you with one other thing. A different Gallup poll, also released that was recently released, shows that the majority of Americans oppose passing a ban on assault rifles, quote unquote, assault rifles. Now, let me say something aside real quick. I got an email from somebody, and I'm not going to say their name in case they listen to this podcast, or just, I'm not going to say their name, period. No reason to shame them. But they emailed me to tell me how wrong I was for using the phrase assault rifles, how inaccurate that phrase is, and such and such. When you read my article, notice the phrase assault rifles is in quotation marks. Why? Why? Because I'm quoting Gallup. So before any of you guys email me to tell me how ignorant I am, when you see the quotation marks, it means I'm quoting somebody. I agree. I think the best phraseology is commonly owned semi-automatic rifles. I believe that is the best phraseology we can use. But I'm quoting Gallup. I'm not quoting me. I'm not quoting one of y'all. I'm quoting Gallup. And Gallup says a majority of Americans oppose banning quote unquote assault rifles. This is a big deal, folks. Again, this is something that CNN, MSNBC, NBC, CBS, ABC, they will not report this. But you ready? Only 40% of Americans support such a ban. Only 40%. Now, as with the push for more gun control, the support, that 40% of Americans largely consists of Democrats. 56% of Democrats support an all-out ban on quote-unquote assault rifles. So that's by and large where the support lies. The Democrats. All right? Only 25% of Republicans support such a ban. Right? Now, I would count those as rhinos. And I know that's going further than we probably can go with this because we got to be purists and just go Republican, Democrat. But anyone who tells me they're a Republican and they support banning commonly owned semi-automatic firearms, they're a rhino at best. They really are. Anyway, this is big news, folks. Because, see, I'm pretty sure Senator Dianne Feinstein, Chuck Schumer, Chris Murphy, those three stooges have tried to convince us that Americans want to get rid of quote-unquote assault weapons, quote-unquote weapons of war, quote-unquote assault rifles. But in reality, they don't. See, here's the problem that anti-gunners face. Anti-gunners face this problem. Once somebody shoots an AR-15, they just go to the range with their buddies and they shoot one. Once they shoot one, they want one. It is a genius design. It is an example of American genius. It's fun to shoot, easy to accessorize, easy to personalize. It's what a gun should be. It's what a gun should be. And that's bad news for the Democrats because when you shoot one, you want one. And that's why under Obama, just under Obama alone, 9.3 million such guns were made to be sold to the American public. Just under Obama alone, 9.3 million. Folks, it's America's gun. It really is. I should say America's rifle, excuse me. That's what the AR-15 is. It's America's rifle. So what Gallup does with this poll is they show majority of Americans do not support banning a rifle, right? And that makes sense because, as I say, this is America's rifle. So, folks, I wanted to be sure I shared those poll results with you up front because it's going to be hard for you to get those results anywhere outside of our coverage of it, or I haven't seen it, So it's important that you see that you know that, Because it's like Trump says. You remember when Trump was elected or was running for election, and he said if he got elected, we would get tired of winning? Well, as far as gun control versus gun rights go, we're winning. That's what this poll tells you. We're winning. Now, folks, a little news on the other side that's not so good, but it's not necessarily damning to your freedom. It's just stupid. A little gun control group called Guns Down America is asking citizens to send a text message to alert authorities if they see an armed citizen near a polling area. Now, here's the problem, folks. There are places you can be armed in certain states legally. And this group is asking people to call the police. In other words, you can tell what they want to do. They want to make trouble. They're saying they're doing this so that armed people cannot intimidate voters who don't share their views. That's not what they're doing. What they're doing is they want to intimidate law-abiding citizens who would be armed like they're armed every day. They want to intimidate them into not carrying their guns. That's what they want to do, all right? What they do, of course, is they say that the political climate created under Donald Trump means we have to be vigilant to be sure Americans aren't carrying guns to the polling booth so that they can intimidate other Americans who don't share their views. They go through this whole deal, you know. That's just not it. This is a veiled attempt to intimidate law-abiding citizens into staying unarmed. That's exactly what this is. We can't abide it. And by that, I mean we can't be intimidated, all right? Now, here's what I think's funny. The founder of this group, Igor Volsky, that's for real, I'm not making it up, Igor Volsky. I'm going to say it one more time. Igor Volsky, the founder of Guns Down America. He quotes the climate under Trump, the climate that Trump has created as justification for this little campaign. He doesn't mention Eric Holder's recent comments about his political opponents. Do you remember Eric Holder's recent comments? In case you missed them, Holder said, when they go low, we kick them. That may be part of the reason some people are armed. They don't want to be kicked. I'm just throwing it out there. Either way, Igor Volsky's little campaign is a joke. But we had to cover it because guess what? Part of the news cycle. Part of the news cycle. And plus, it's part of what we do at Breitbart. We bring you the news that's pertinent as it relates to your firearms. All right? Now, listen. This will be, I'll close out the first segment of the podcast with this. This Beto O'Rourke in Texas, who's trying to challenge Ted Cruz for the Senate seat. He claims to be pro-Second Amendment. He'll say that. And then he'll follow that up with all the gun control he supports. Well, this week in a town hall with CNN, Beto praised Texas gun culture. This is no joke. What I'm going to tell you, you're going to look at your listening device like a dog looks at a high-pitched sound. You know how you cock your head kind of to the side and you're just curious and it doesn't make sense. And that's what you're going to do when I say this, but I'm not making a mistake. This is what he did. He praised Texas gun culture, then said Texas should lead the national conversation for gun control. In other words, Texas has a gun culture that has zero to do with gun control. It has everything to do with freedom. And after praising it, O'Rourke said Texans should now lead the nation in the conversation for gun control. Why would they do that? Why? Why would they trade their freedom for shackles? Why? It's supposed to be the other way around. See, this is what the Democrat Party doesn't get. They are constantly trying to lead you back to the plantation. I know you know this. Maybe some of you new listeners don't. I'm not putting you down. I'm going to help you out here. The party of slavery was the Democrat Party. The Civil War, in my opinion, is best taught as a war between Republicans and Democrats. Republicans were in the North, Democrats were in the South. Republicans were the Union, Democrats were the Confederacy. Democrats were the party of slavery. See, it's so funny. For all the Democrat talk about freedom and loving this and loving that, the Democrats were Jefferson Davis, right? The Democrats were the officers in the Confederacy. And the Republicans were Abraham Lincoln and the officers in the Union. And following the Civil War, the Democrats put in place the black codes so that they could keep recently freed slaves under their thumb. At the same time, they created the KKK. The KKK was a Democrat institution. It was comprised of Democrats. I'll say it that way. If you don't believe me, that's fine. Just read a little history, folks. During the Reconstruction era, the Democrats used the Ku Klux Klan to intimidate black voters out of voting because they didn't want people voting Republican in the South. Golly. And long after Reconstruction and the KKK's actions then and the Civil War, you hit the 20th century and they brought back the black codes, the Democrats did, as Jim Crow laws. And they used those laws to keep civil rights activists down. You don't believe me? That's all right. Just look up some video of Bull Connor in Alabama turning on those water hoses on the blacks. Look it up. When you look at that, you're looking at a Democrat turning on the water hoses on black citizens. Now, why am I going through all this? I'm going through all this because throughout our history, the Democrats have guarded their plantation. They kept blacks on their plantation as slaves. Once the law wouldn't allow that anymore, they used policies in the black codes and the Jim Crow laws. They used policies to try to persuade blacks they had to stay on the plantation whether they wanted to or not. They used the Ku Klux Klan to try to scare them into staying on the plantation. And now what do you have with this O'Rourke guy in Texas? He's trying once again to move people back to the plantation. I'm not just saying blacks, don't hear me wrong. But he's trying to persuade people to embrace enslavement, to trade freedom for enslavement via gun control. Folks, please learn this. When you watch the Democrats, they're constantly trying to take something from you. When you watch the Republicans, they're trying to give you something. Now, I know it's presented just the opposite, because the Democrats are going to give us free health care. They're going to give us free this, free that. But if you look at it rationally, Democrats are trying to take something from you. In the case of O'Rourke in Texas, he's trying to take away your gun rights, trying to make you dependent on government for your safety. Republicans try to give you freedom by saying, look, the Second Amendment is your carry permit. Just a completely different world. Republicans throw open the gate and say, look, leave the plantation. Now, there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee that you'll hit this level of success or that level of success outside the plantation, but guess what? It'll be up to you. Your talent level, your ambition, your drive are the only limitations you'll face, because as Republicans, we're going to get the government out of your way. Just a completely different world than the Democrats offer you. And O'Rourke embodies it. He praises the freedom that Texans have enjoyed, and then he offers them enslavement. That's an easy choice for me. That's an easy choice for me. And that when that's presented to me, I immediately know I'd be voting Ted Cruz. That's what I'd be doing. Folks, you're listening to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. We'll be back right after this.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
The real thing that the left is angry about is they're like, how could you allow these Russian memes? Somebody saw a meme and then they decided they had to vote for Trump. Or it must have been fake news. And by fake news, they mean conservative websites. Come on. But this is what the left thinks. Fake news. And by fake news, what they mean is shut down Breitbart.
Breitbart News Tonight. Weeknights starting at 9 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125. This is Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is AWR Hawkins.
Welcome back to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. Folks, we had a weird deal this week in Missoula, Montana. Now, I'm not familiar with Missoula. I know those of you who live in Montana are. But I've had friends who tell me that Missoula is not like the rest of the state, that it's where a lot of liberals from California and other places have relocated. I'm not putting you down if you live in Montana. I'm just saying that's what I've heard, which may explain this. They passed last week a gun ban effective immediately. Let me say it again. In Montana, a gun ban effective immediately. Now, it's only good for the city of Missoula, but what it does is it limits where law-abiding citizens can carry guns for self-defense, and it takes a lot of publicly owned places away, museums, libraries, different places. Now, there's certainly going to be a challenge to this because a publicly owned place is a place that taxpayers pay for, right? And that means that it's a place where taxpayers ought to be able to exercise their God-given rights, correct? So when the city says to them, look, you're going to pay for this place, but you can't exercise your rights there, it sets up an inevitable lawsuit, and I would think it sets up an inevitable loss for the city that put it in place. All right? Now, that's just me, but that's how we're thinking. So that has happened in Missoula. They passed two bans, one that went into effect immediately, one that goes effect in 30 days. It's kind of overkill, but the one that took effect immediately was put there to fill the gap until the one that takes effect in 30 days takes effect. I know that's all redundant, but it's how bureaucrats work. But anyway, if you live in Missoula, why are you giving the city council this much power? Or, let's reword it, why are you voting for these kinds of people for your city council? It's ridiculous. They passed a gun ban in Montana. Folks, that is crazy. But hey, that's part of the news. That's part of the news. Folks, we published a video of a city commissioner shooting and killing a suspected thief at a surplus store, Lake City, Florida. The commissioner was Michael Dunn at the Vets Army Navy surplus store, and the suspect allegedly took a hatchet. And he paid with his life for it. The commissioner has since been charged. Now, I didn't know if he would be charged or not because if indeed the suspect stole a hatchet seemed like a tool he could spin around and hurt the commissioner with as the commissioner tried to talk him out of leaving the store. The commissioner grabbed his arm, tried to pull him back in the store, and the suspect tried to pull away, which is the point at which the commissioner shot him and killed him. Now, I didn't know because of the hatchet. I didn't know if this would fall under a stand your ground shooting and the commissioner would be justified. I didn't know. But as it turns out, no. The commissioner has been charged. So that's that. And just wanted to share that with you to be sure you know that came full circle. Folks, we had something kind of crazy. Blake Fisher, Idaho Fish and Game Commissioner, had to resign over a baboon hunt, a legal baboon hunt in Africa. Let me say it again. Legal baboon hunt in Africa. But he had to resign. He had to resign because he put up pictures of the hunt, and people responded to it. A lot of backlash, and a lot of the backlash came from former fish and game commissioners who did not want their hunting, the idea of hunting to be maligned. Here's really the one I thought was best. Tony McDermott, a former commissioner, was one of the ones who voiced support for having Fisher resign over the hunt. But McDermott, now think about what I'm going to say. McDermott could not be reached for comment because he was on a hunting trip. Let me sum this up again. This is crazy. Is Rod Serling going to come out right now? So you have Blake Fisher, a fish and wildlife commissioner, fish and game commissioner in Idaho. He goes on a legal baboon hunt in Africa. He posts pictures of the legal hunt. He is asked by former fish and game commissioners to resign. One of those is Tony McDermott. But McDermott could not be reached for comment because he was on a hunting trip. What? It's just me, but if I had been Blake Fisher, I think I'd have stuck it out. I'd have made him fire me. If the people criticizing me for going on this hunting trip and posting pictures of it can't be reached for comment because they're on a hunting trip, there's a good chance that people that can't be reached for comment are jealous that Fisher was able to shoot and kill something and they weren't. I'm just throwing out ideas. I mean, what do I know? But I just don't think I would have resigned. I think I would have toughed it out and made them fire me. That's all I'm saying. That's it. Now, look, folks, one other thing. It's so common in our society to see Hollywood trying to tell us what to do, to see celebrities, leftist pop singers trying to tell us what to do. And it's always, of course, pro-gun control. It's always anti-freedom. I want to give a shout-out to country star John Rich. John Rich tweeted this week that he was going that day, the day of his tweet, he was going to the poll to vote for Marsha Blackburn in Tennessee. With Rich was Lee Greenwood, proud to be an American, T.G. Shepard, and others. He also pointed out that owner of Barrett Rifles would be going with him. Barrett Rifles, that's a phenomenal gun. So I just want to point that out. Dave Ramsey, Dave Ramsey, the financial guru, he was going to vote for Marsha Blackburn. I just want to give them some props because sometimes that kind of news gets covered up. It gets covered up by Taylor Swift saying she's going to vote for Phil Bredesen. Well, great. I would rather vote for the person for whom John Rich is voting. I'll just tell you that right now. Folks, I want to tell you something before this segment's over. I've been shooting a Rock Island Armory Ultra FS. It's a 10 millimeter. It's a 1911 in 10 millimeter. It's sick. It is so accurate. It is unbelievable. Unbelievable. All right? Now, I'm just putting that gun out in front of you. Now, it's a large gun. It's a full-size 1911. It's not a gun. Now, I could carry it concealed. It depends on your build if you could carry it concealed. Someone who's petite could not do it. I'm not petite. But wow, what a gun. Fits the hand perfectly, and it is deadly accurate. And it cycles no problem. There are no jams. There are no misfires. There are no feeding problems. This thing is smooth, and it is accurate. Rock Island Armory Ultra FS 10 millimeter. Wow. And I love the 10 millimeter. You know, I posted some videos of it on Instagram, pictures, I should say, and people immediately respond. 10 millimeter is underrated and this and that, and they're correct. They're correct. And but this Rock Island Armory Ultra FS is a fine weapon. It was immediately one of the 3 most accurate handguns I've ever shot. And there may be 4 that fit that category of the most, but it's right in that category. It was unbelievable. Out of the box. And so I'm just sharing that with you. For those of you who may be looking for a new gun, and particularly a new gun that you could use for some serious steel plinking, the Rock Island Armory Ultra FS is phenomenal. Folks, you're listening to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. We'll be back right after this.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson.
Everything in hip-hop is not bad. Kanye agreed with us, so let's love him today until he raps tomorrow and you turn your back. Because if you jump off when the fun of the moment is over, then you are in fact making Kanye the token he is accused of being. So please, don't do that. Don't go there.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson. Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125. This is Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is AWR Hawkins.
Welcome back to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. You know, folks, I love to wind down the podcast by talking to you about the Second Amendment in action. We had a 41-year-old daughter in Bonner County, Idaho, who shot and killed a suspect to save her 70-year-old mother. And, the details on this story were scant, but it's pretty evident that she acted, so say the police, in self-defense. Now, they might still do some investigating, but when police arrived, they found Joshua Matthew Cole down, and people were trying to save his life, and deputies and EMS stepped in and tried to do it. But anyway, it didn't work. She shot him with a handgun to defend her mother. Again, her mother was 70 years old, and this story is brought to you by the Second Amendment. Folks, we had another story. We had a neighbor who intervened because he saw a mother and her young daughter being attacked. Now, this happened in southern Indiana. If any of you have been in Louisville, Kentucky, you can look right across the river there into Clarksville, Indiana, and that's where this happened. It was about 10 p.m., and the neighbor noticed that a man was attacking, allegedly, the mother and daughter. The young daughter was battered, quote unquote, battered, says the Clarksville police chief, Mark Palmer. That's what he said witnesses told him, that the young girl was battered. And the suspect also allegedly assaulted the mom, and the neighbor stepped in with a gun drawn, told the guy to pull it together and stop. The guy sat down for a while and then allegedly got up and began to attack the neighbor, or tried to. And at that point, the neighbor shot. And that's that. As far as the bad guy goes, he's gone, and the mother and daughter live another day, as does the neighbor. Folks, this story is brought to you by the Second Amendment. Folks, it's hard to beat gun rights, isn't it? It's hard to beat having a fundamental right to self-defense, a right to defend your life, which is your greatest property. But that's what the Second Amendment protects, and that's what sets us apart from all other nations, all other nations. Folks, thanks for listening to Bullets with AWR Hawkins this week. Get your friends, your family members, your coworkers to listen. Just get them to go to iTunes and subscribe. The podcast downloads for free every Tuesday to their phone. They can listen to it while they commute or while they're sitting at home, or sitting out back, just watching the beautiful weather, enjoying the fall. They can just sit out one day and listen to it. Be sure after you listen a few times, you go back to the main page on iTunes, the main page for the podcast, and give us some reviews. We need all the 5-star reviews we can get. And until we're together again, always remember, more guns equal more freedom.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlow.
Why did we see some of the Republican kissing of Mark Zuckerberg that was taking place?
I called it kissing the ring because I felt like every single person practically had to kiss the ring of this guy, who wants to do nothing except get all those people out of office. So, bizarre behavior from the Republicans.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on Sirius XM Patriot 125.